No matter your age, your plan for retirement can start today. From the News Channel 5 network, this is the Retirement Report.
Good morning. Welcome to the Retirement Report. I'm Hank Parrott, your host. Today we're going to be talking about estate planning. This is one of those in my book, 7 Steps to Financial Freedom in Retirement. That's chapter number 7. This is after you get all your ducks in a row, so to speak. We've done the financial planning. We've got your retirement income set up. We've got you invested properly to get the protections you need to manage the risks, minimize it as much as we can. Tax planning, all of those things are happening, right? We get all that done. We want to at least make sure that we touch upon estate planning. And in fact, this is something that sometimes I've got clients that will come in for the first time, and that's the first thing they want to deal with. And maybe there was some event, maybe they lost a parent, maybe there was something that happened in their lives that made that more important, all of a sudden a priority for them. And unfortunately, it is one of the things we tend to procrastinate, right? Well, we'll get to that, right? We'll get that will done, or we'll get those powers of attorney set up, or maybe that revocable living trust. We'll get to that. Well, this is the day to get to that, okay? We're going to help you with it. And here to help me today with that is Russ Cook with Cook Tillman Legal Associates. You got it right?
No.
No?
Cook Tillman Law Group.
Law Group.
You were very close, Hank. I have to give you that.
Getting better.
Yes.
Cook Tillman Law Group over in Brentwood, Tennessee. The name has changed, so I'm still catching up.
That's right.
And I've been working with Russ for, I think, 20 plus years now. And one of the things that in all these years is that we get clients that have passed. And so I've got to see the work on the other side when we're administering the estate, when we're in the trust, of course, to see that the documents in fact hold up, and a lot of different challenges sometimes that they've done well, and we basically the clients have got what they intended to get out of their estate planning, and that's of course what it's all about. So Russ is again a board certified estate planning attorney, does excellent work. We've got a lot of mutual clients over the years, and Russ, one of the things that just this week, and this surprised me because I'm talking to a gentleman, and he mentioned some people out of Memphis that he had worked with, and that they had told him that the trust, that he could not be the trustee of his own trust. So this to me, I was like, well, you know, this is where the basics come in. So what we're going to talk about is the parties to a trust. So we're going to address that question, but starting with uses of trust, the types of trust. These are some of the things we're going to cover today. A little bit of advanced trust planning. Again, the goal being, and I've got a great slideshow I'm going to show you here, a slide deck from Nationwide Retirement Institute. I like, as you know, a lot of their materials help us talk about some of these important topics. So the other misconceptions of trust, that they're complicated or expensive, confusing, only for the ultra wealthy, or time consuming. So Russ, this is one of those areas like complicated. This I say to people all the time when they talk about anything being complicated, it's like you don't need to know how to rebuild an engine to drive a car. You don't need to know how all the intricacies that go into and the laws and everything that go into, well, a trust document as an example, to be able to use that for your goals, your financial needs, and your estate planning needs, of course. So why don't you address each of those bullet points a little bit, the complicated part. I mean, the more stuff you put in, it's typically because people need those things to accomplish their goals.
Yeah, that's true. What I'd have to say on the front end is that you want to make sure that you partner yourself with an estate planning attorney and a financial advisor that are familiar with these concepts, because that is going to help make sure that this plan that we're talking about is put in place properly. But just to kind of give you an idea of what's involved, when we talk about trusts, at least initially, a trust is a document in which you, let's say you're the one setting it up, you're the grantor, and if it's a revocable trust, which is the one that we use primarily to do estate planning, then you're the trustee, you're the beneficiary. The trust itself is not a separate legal entity. It does not have its own tax return. It uses your Social Security number, and it does not file tax returns, like I said before. So everything that the trust is not complicated because it's as if you're still owning those assets. The only difference is you're owning them as trustee of your trust. If you have joint assets and you have a joint trust, it's the same way. It's you and your spouse that's the trustee, you and your spouse are the beneficiary, and the assets are held as if they were still joint. So there's really nothing complicated about it going forward. It's just that as long as you have the advisors in place that can put this together and help you walk through it, it's not going to be an issue.
This is another, talk about expensive. This is another misconception of trust. Understanding as far as expense. Remember the old commercial about oil changes, right? Pay me now or pay me later. In other words, if you don't take care of your car, if you don't change the oil regularly, that it's going to get filled with sludge and you may have to get a whole new engine. A lot more expensive than doing the oil changes and keeping up the maintenance. So it's the same concept here in a sense, right? When you're thinking in terms of pay me now or pay me later, as far as trusts, let's say, being expensive, they're less expensive than not having a trust in the long term for the estate. Because what we're thinking of is the estate. It's kind of, think of it like the family business, right? The family estate. This is where you want as much of that to go down your bloodline for most people, right? Most of it to stay in the family and not get paid out in additional attorney's fees and probate costs that go with not having a trust and going through the probate process. So even though in Tennessee it's not as bad as in other states, there's still more expensive to go through a probate process than it would be to set up the trust. So there's an example. Trusts are more expensive to set up than, say, a will would be, but less expensive in the long term to what a will would cost when you factor in probate costs as well. So that's expense. Now, confusing. This is another one, Russ, that if you're trying to read through any legal document, that can be confusing.
Yeah.
Okay. But again, and in particular when there's references made to, to law in the books and different, in that situation, I'm not going to know what that is, but I don't need to know what that is. As long as you know what it is and we're getting that set up the way we want. And I know with your documents, there's a certain part of that legalese that has to be in there, but you do try to minimize it.
Yeah, I do, and I try to explain to the clients what these provisions mean, which is important because I think even though they may not be able to read them and figure out what they say, they still should know what they say, and I think my job is to make sure that I explain that to them. So again, that's probably the difference. Now I know some folks, they go on, software programs and do their own trust. I think in that scenario, it would end up being complicated, right? Because you're being asked questions you might not know the answers to. But if you get together with people that understand trusts and know how they're set up, they can explain to you all the provisions in these trusts so you're very comfortable when you sign them knowing what's in them.
This is one of those areas, to your point. I remember years ago, I had a gentleman up in Clarksville that I was working with, and he had set up his own trust. And so I was looking over the document, just, and asking him a little bit about it and what prompted it. And he said one of the things was real important to him is he wanted to avoid probate. It had, some family history there, bad experiences, so he wanted everything set up to avoid probate. And I said, well, that's, understandable. However, what you've set up is a testamentary trust. So basically, Russ, without realizing it, that trust wasn't getting funded. Nothing was done. It was set up to not actually go into effect until after he died.
That's right.
So it wasn't done during his lifetime. So basically the very thing he wanted to avoid, and the reason he was doing this document, I thought, well, where did you get the document? He says, well, I just started looking online and piecing things together. And so this is not a do-it-yourself workshop and not a good idea. As I said, you can, in that situation, what happened, and even with certain attorneys, you can have miscommunications and things in there that you didn't intend to be. I had a client years ago that they had set up a trust, and I think he was retired military. And as I recall, I think there was part of his benefits is he could get legal work done. And so he had gone to, I guess, the JAG and got a document done, got a trust done. And whether it was in the communication with the attorney or what exactly happened, I was going again over the document, and I'm like, you know, it says here, if you predecease your wife, that the monies are going to be the car, and there was some other things that were going to be going to your daughter. So basically, your wife was going to have to go to her daughter to ask for money. And I'm like, I don't, and the wife looked at him. It's like, I'm gonna what? So again, do it yourself, not the best way to go. So we're gonna be taking a break. When we come back, a couple of more on the misconceptions about the ultra wealthy being only for those and time consuming. We'll address those two, and then we'll get into some more uses of trust and some of the basics for you before on to, if we have time, into some advanced topics. So first a break. Join us here. We'll be right back on the Retirement Report.
This is a Storm 5 weather update. For weather on the go, download the Storm Shield app.